to another episode of TNFro Is Reading How. I'm your host, Felicia Baxter. In this episode, I'm actually recording from Lookout Mountain, or near Lookout Mountain. And it just seems that this week has been most productive. I will be basically playing or posting my verbal recordings of comments on taking back my power. We had several anxiety-provoking moments, just life this past week, and I wrote about it. And here you go. Megxit, nah, girl, this is all hairy. They just need the former artist known as the Sussexes alone. Her queen, Her Majesty, has spoken. They said, you want to move back from royal duties? Well, you can't use the titles. Interesting. I finally finished my blog post that I started like 2 years ago. Nationwide, I hit a bear. I commented on watching Bad Boys, the reprisal of Will Smith and Martin Lawrence's movie that dropped 25 years ago. And also why we won't and can't leave Tyler Perry alone, even though he really needs a writer's room. I will also round it out about what I'm reading, because I wrote a whole bunch this past week. I've read and I'm learning about what's this wonderful civil rights activist name, just in time for MLK's birthday, Ellen Garrison Jackson. Finishing, and not even close to finishing up, Ida, A Sword Among Lions, celebrating MLK, and then moving on to the conclusion. And as always, thank you for joining me in this episode of TNFro Is Reading, and I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I've enjoyed creating it. For the last several weeks, the press has been in an uproar about the Prince and Princess of Sussex, Meghan and Harry, and their intention to step back from royal duties. And now they've been granted that because I think the Queen knew that he was going to extricate himself no matter what she said. So the latest on that is, okay, so you're not going to be on your daddy's dole. You're going to have to pay back the renovations of Frogmore Cottage, which is kind of like a mini mansion in my opinion. And you're going to have to come up with who's going to pay for your security contingent while you're in Canada. And you can't use your titles anymore. And I honestly think, in the grand scheme of things, with this update, they're not going to care because they have all they need, and their plan all along was to extricate himself from the conformity and the restrictions that those titles held. And I think they're going to make it work. It's just a shame that they couldn't change and modify the protocol and modernize the way the monarchy is defined without completely obliterating it. And it just seems like they're going to be in the same boat, not to the same extremis as the abdication of Queen Elizabeth's uncle Edward when he abdicated for the divorcee. I don't think is that extreme, but they've been stripped of their titles, and I think that she's going to have to come up with some way. And I honestly end up thinking when it comes down to it, they don't really need the titles to know that they're royal. But at the same time, I think they're going to have to redefine it, and they're going to get those titles back. And furthermore, enjoy my reading of my blog post, Megxit, this is all Harry. Harry acting out of character because he has the support of a loving wife, period. Just like William has the support of his wife, each are really following along their own path. They are their mother's children. They will carve out and be who they are, so the rest of us just have to get over it. I think Prince Harry's biographer got it all wrong. I remember the days of his youth when he was wilding out in pool parties and he was the real ladies' man with several high-profile socialites, dating several high-profile socialites. And now he has contained his rebellious nature and he's rebelling against being a part of the idle rich and on his daddy's dole. Why is financial independence and living outside of the monarchy so wrong in 2020? I'm definitely Team Harry and Meghan. And also I'm on the Team William too because they're Diana's kids. They will and always be them Diana's boys. Just one word, the Queen has her own issues and she has her own handfuls with her pedophile relating son Andrew. How crazy are we to react negatively to when a family member wants to step back from vapid royal duties and progress on his own terms, and also in a positive way? It's not like he's getting more notoriety like his pedophile uncle Andrew. But don't get it twisted. She's basically stating emphatically that she loves her wayward, contrary grandson. And she also knows he will follow in his own path. And that doesn't seem to mean that he's cut off from the family in no way, shape, or form. He's just going to be a positive representation of the family, but by not following protocol and rules. I think Harry, in his own way, is going to usher in a new relevance to the monarchy in a time where people are questioning, why is there still a monarchy and is there still a need, an ongoing need for the monarchy? I think for historical reasons, yes. And I don't think the British should basically brush away history, but at the same time, I do think they need to refresh and redefine themselves. But it is still clear that this grandma gangster is still at the helm and she's still defining the role that they will take. And she's going to support it no matter what, because that's what grandmoms do. And she's just like any other boss bitch. She is still under control. She's not going to let the media and the world define how her family is going to remain relevant, and it's not going to spoil them being together, because first and foremost, that's her grandson and you need to back off, period. So, in an effort to multitask, taking back my power. This morning, I started my day let's see, exhilarated with reading about Ida B. Wells, counting all the badass women I am aware of, including my mother, her mother, my grandmother Mary, my Aunt Vern, my cousin Viva, my Aunt Lud, my friend Suzanne, period. Also, nationally known, the great RGB and her fight against cancer, which she apparently seems to be winning, and she's back at work, period. As well as that badass head of the House, Nancy Pelosi. ... Holy crap, she knew exactly what she was doing. Exclamation point. She knew there was more evidence out there, and she knew all that dirt would come to light. Period. She knew that there was no rush or did not want to bring an hasty end to it would be a travesty of justice, period. She knew that they were hiding something, call it women's intuition or not, period. And she knew there was something sketch about the goal of McConnell and those dumbasses trying to bring a hasty end to the impeachment hearing. And the more worked up they got, it seems she knew that they were hiding something. If you have nothing to hide, then you talk. That's actually not even a Dr. Phil-ism. That's just the truth. So she knew that and verbalized what the rest of us sane people have known for a while, that there was a cover up amongst us or going on, period. And according to a reliable source, and I'll get his name in a minute, he has the pictures cozying up with Giuliani and the president, and the more he basically denies, he basically has the evidence. There are more text messages, recorded sessions of the president and his goons' complicity in the cover-up of Ukraine. Period. And the GAO has come up to say, as soon as he gave the order to withhold the funds, he broke the law. So, in this country, if you break the law, you're going to pay the penalty. And therefore, the proceedings will go forward, and the cover up and all this dirt is coming to light. Period. If he truly does get removed from office, which seems to be the fitting penalty for breaking the law, constitutional wise anyways, it stands to be seen. And I'm wondering, if he is removed from office, does this negate his ability to actually run for president? Question mark. We have no precedence for convicted. Let me scratch that. We have no precedence for an impeached and convicted president and their ability to run for office again. I think if you get removed from office, that negates your ability to run for that office again. Well, that's what happens in the private sector. And then if he is convicted for those crimes, then everything else seems to be sped up because I heard that his company is in litigation from past due bills, bankruptcies, faulting on contracts, etc. It'll be like a legal pile on if he truly is removed from office. Period. Next line. I am also further energized that there is to be a gun rally. Or actually, more so that I was concerned about this gun rally in Richmond on Monday of all days, with the clear intent by white supremacists to enact further violence on innocent Americans just for the hell of it, period. I don't think there was any mistake that gun loving, crazy people were descending, and this rally was to be held on the day of a peace loving, gun down leader of the civil rights and equality, Martin Luther King's birthday. I think it was symbolic and completely against everything he stood for as an apparent slap in his face. And I think it, from that standpoint, is absolutely despicable. But it looks like it's getting ready to be shut down because 3 of the figureheads have been jailed. And I'm not really shocked. I'm actually happy that the intel was shared, the government acted appropriately, and steps are being taken to protect the public or innocent bystanders. But I just annoyed that they still are having the rally on a pacifist birthday. Who does that? Question mark. I'm all for your right to protest, but at the same time, why do it on that day? I see the attacks on sanity, law, ethics every single day, and it's hand-rending and saddening all at the same time. We have leaders that every time that open their mouths, we know that their lies going to spew forward and skeletons are going to fly out. While we sleep, we have a leader that is recreating his government to create a modern day Slavic empire and making himself emperor, that he will possibly hold on to the presidency forever, period. We have Arabic and Korean crazy people with their fingers on the red button that I doubt will hesitate to use brute force against their own people. I'm concerned about whole species and people disappearing in the flames down under. And as we all slept, it seems someone has pulled on the strings of sanity and it's all unraveling. ... But God, period. He breathes peace into all of the madness. There's so many good things to look forward to. And the sun comes up over the mountains and I can count my blessings on the things I can control. And just get started on the numerous things that I want to do and I can do. And I can't get caught up in all the anxiety of the moment because I can't control any of it. So why be anxious for it? And just like that, all the anxiety is gone and I can face the day and the world, rediscovering those things, which they are numerous, that I enjoy and that make me happy. I make myself this promise and resolve to start each day thankful, count my blessings, and doing that thing which makes me happy, the thing that I love. And the challenges for you is to start your day loving and doing the things that you love. You can take back your power, get a handle on the anxiety, and just let it go. There's certain things that we can't control, but continue to do the things that we can control and that don't cause us to be anxious. That I do dare you. Dare you.
I'm just gonna come out and say it. The community garden that we walked by, I got married.
So, I don't know why I've sat on this story. I don't know why I've sat on the story for so long, but
I'm sorry if I said the wrong signal.
Was told this during one of my training sessions when I was up north in Newton Grove, I think it is, for one of the jobs that I had just recently taken.
They tried to figure it out.
And it reminded me, and I wanted to relate a story from that could be told to Nationwide. Here we go.
It's almost 2 years ago now. No, blue. My life's great.
Hello, Nationwide claims this is Jocelyn. May I help you?
It's like
I have been in an accident.
Victorian.
The customer service agent.
So,
Are you safe? Is your vehicle off the road?
What I'm going through?
Me, yes.
Yeah, totally.
But I'm scared to get out because I'm scared to get out of the car.
Yeah, I know.
Customer service. Why is that, ma'am? Well, I just hit a bear and I don't know if he's actually really dead. Customer service agent.
Yeah.
Stunned silence.
You felt it.
So,
real love.
I have been a customer with Nationwide for actually 27 years. And I think I have, in that, mostly not sainted, vaulted places of the disappearing deductible club. But I have made some laugh track worthy calls to the collision center over those past 2 decades. And 2 occasions actually start out or remind me of a crazy call. For example, I had called and said, help, someone stole my heating unit. This was during the height of the copper coil jacking days in North Carolina. I remember the customer service agent laughing for a good 10 minutes before she took the rest of that claim. And then I called not only to put my new Jeep Cherokee on my policy, but also report a collision because I fell asleep behind the wheel. I slid off the road in South Carolina into a tree, causing about 15 G's worth of damage to a car that I just had bought and giving my dog Fred long-term PTSD. But this call in Pennsylvania was straight out of something I can't even imagine. And it was a conversation I can only imagine between
Okay, Mr. Rogers, good night.
my friend Laura and the Nationwide agent. She was returning home with her daughter in a darkened Pennsylvania highway when in the circle of her headlights appeared a brown bear crossing the road. Insert multiple funny questions here because I know my night vision is absolutely horrible. And that makes me, number one, once it's dark, I don't go out. And number two, I know Laura, and I don't know if she was chatting with her kids or if she was scanning or what. But sometimes we see things in our side of vision and it doesn't compute. And it's mostly like, this can't be real. And I could only imagine how dark it was in the backwoods in Pennsylvania, because I don't think they have a lot of
Why is he looking for you?
lights back there. But I was always wondering why she didn't see him off the side of the
It
road.
wasn't easy for me to get here.
And why was Yogi out crossing the road anyways? Where was he going in the middle of December? Wasn't he supposed to be hibernating, or was he sleepwalking? But the whole story made absolutely no sense to me. Yes, Laura and her kids were okay. No, the bear wasn't. He was really dead, and he wasn't playing dead. And not only did they send a wrecker, but they also had to send a game warden, because the bear was over almost 500 pounds. That, to me, has to be the weirdest situation and explanation for collision. And now that they're making me have like wind insurance on my property in North Carolina, I wonder if they have in locales such as the eastern part of the state, in North Carolina, in the mountains, or now in Pennsylvania, you now have to have bear insurance. As we encroach on their habitat, we're going to have insurance when car meets bear or bison or elk. You know, I think the animal's going to win to a certain extent. But that's my bear story. And it was just so incredulous, I had to relate it.
I need to figure out a way to see this through, whatever it is. No one knows you're here. No one can take care of you if the guy you stole from murders me. Am I making sense?
Bad Boys for Life and the Tyler Perry issue.
He owes me 50 large. He's good. He just texted me the code word.
So
this is important.
I'm sitting in one of my favorite restaurants in Chattanooga. Well, actually, it's in Hickson, Tennessee. It's called Noodles and Pho. This particular pho is not as traditional in a sense that there's no tripe or tendon included. I only think the only place in town that actually includes those ingredients is the Rice Box in the south part of town, which I was not in, and I wasn't driving all the way down there. Traffic is kind of bad here. But I decided to stop in to have lunch before seeing Bad Boys, the newly released Martin Lawrence and Will Smith movie. And it was a perfect day for pho. I thought giving myself 1 hour before the movie was supposed to start would give me enough time to be seated, have some Vietnamese coffee, which is espresso with sweetened cream. Perfect start, because I was going to need that caffeine to stay awake after eating all of that pho and having tempura shrimp to boot. I was still enjoying myself, even though I had already decided that I was going to have to leave, because after sitting there for 50 minutes with 9 minutes to spare before my movie started, I still had not received my order.
Please don't let them ask me. I'm sorry.
I was encouraged, in spite of the fact that even in spite of the obviously stressed out cashier, waitress, busboy who exuded no joy, but she possessed attention to detail I had never witnessed in anyone, in a place that was obviously filling up. She and her chef, I assume husband,
Lucy Sprecher. She meant love.
even though they perform their duty without joy, they still produce a pretty amazing product. I was feeling blessed on my lack of feeling trapped in doing what I liked. And if I stopped liking it, I would or could leave. No problem.
Here we go.
I will freely admit that I did end up going back. As I said, I had to leave before my food got there, and I went back, and I did have a very amazing bowl of pho, and I also added autumn because what is it called? The wraps, in addition to the shrimp tempura. I do like the batter that they use in their tempura. And I also did dig the autumn wraps. I wanted, or I should have ordered the fried version of it, but I'm sure I'll go back and I can have that the next time. But on to Bad Boys. I freely admit that I had low expectations about the movie itself. I wasn't really too impressed with the trailer. In the season of reboot, I was like, why now? I also was concerned with Will Smith's statement about how the roles were just not coming in, and Hollywood had really stopped knocking. Back in the day when he first made Bad Boys, he was cranking out 2 and 3 movies a year, I think. His last movie he made was back in 2015 when he portrayed the Nigerian doctor in Concussion. And then he had the role in the live-action adaptation of Aladdin just last year, or was it year before last? And even though he was a cartoon, that movie grossed over $1 billion worldwide, making it the largest grossing or most grossing movie that he's actually been involved in, which is kind of weird. I had concerns how the now 50-year-old Mike Lowry was going to transition into the current old granddaddy, Mike Lowry. And I wasn't disappointed because both Martin Lawrence and Will Smith's character were a little bit jowly. I thought Martin Lawrence was finally on to some good meds or at the right dosage, and he finally grew into those ears. What I was really impressed about was how they pulled off the middle-aged versions of their 25-year-old selves without too much clowning and trying too hard to be funny. There were a whole bunch of great lines in the movies, like, how you gonna fuck a witch without a condom? Yes, there is a witch in the movie. You gotta see it to believe it. I think they integrated that storyline in well. And Marcus commenting on the Mike Lowry character, supernatural ass whipping. You could see versions of his old hyper self, the little Marty Marr was there, but he wasn't going to work all that hard or completely come out of what he was going through, I think, in real life. The Martin Lawrence character, in fact. I realized that anytime they had drinking scenes while they were all drinking hard liquor, I think he was drinking Beck's through most of that movie. And a lot of the most a lot of the action was actually done by the younger millennial characters in the movie. I thought they did a really good job of Mike Lowry coming face to face with the embodiment of all of his crazy. And they kept their shirts on, which I was really happy about, but they still played into the Will Smith character, Mike Lowry, fantasy that he was still 25 years old, and some of the cuts of his pants and some of the combination of clothes that he wore. He reminded me of my own uncle that still think they're fly, but they got bad feet and they're just too old for that kind of dress. I was like, why did they have to put them little shirts on him though? But he pulled it off. Again, and it wasn't that they were trying so hard. There was a real attention to detail as they came to terms with their middle-aged self. There was just enough action, and there was the storyline made sense. I liked that it was in Miami, and then it flowed into Mexico. And again, the pace of the movie was actually really good. I was very concerned that Martin Lawrence and some of the scenes and things were going to drag a bit, but it really didn't. There were a lot of twists and turns. I thought it was funny, meaning laugh out loud funny. And I thought this reboot was necessary. And then there's also a teaser at the end where I think they're going to be making subsequent movies. This is the third in the franchise of the Bad Boys. I'm thinking there may be one, maybe two more movies to follow up. And I think I'll go to it. And hasta fuego, y'all. That line will make sense if you got to go see the movie. And I recommend that you do see the movie. Now, on to Tyler Perry. And I'm not going to waste any time giving this movie or his latest movie endeavor any more time than it actually really needs to be given. I think that everyone is going to roast this in the African American pop culture community. I don't really want to pile on. It's just that, I don't know. I just want to keep it positive. So, I want to go on record to say that I will give most black and brown people's movies a try. I have to be in the right frame of mind to watch some subtitles, but if it seems like it has a good storyline, I'll probably get into it. But I have a problem, or I'm having a problem with Sir Tyler Perry's movies. I give this gentleman his props because he does have a solid work ethic. He writes, produces, directs, and in addition to co-star in all of his movies. He's crazy rich, and he was made crazy rich banking on a formula that worked. However, after reviewing or viewing A Fall from Grace, and I actually, it didn't drop until this weekend, and I actually put it to automatically be added to my reminders to watch in Netflix because I knew it was coming out. I was excited to, maybe it was not going to be as bad as Acrimony, but I wasn't, again, just like Bad Boys, I had very low expectations. And after viewing it on Netflix, now I can understand why it was not available and why it didn't premiere on BET Plus, of which he is a part owner. How he's basically double dipping. He basically got someone else to pay him for his movie. Of course, I don't know the details of the deal he got from them, but this is pretty sweet. He still has content, but he actually has stuff that can be produced and viewed across multiple platforms. That's the dream. But as a fan, I wish he would have used the script writers that I know that are out there that could have made this storyline and this movie even better. For example, the movie itself is about a divorcee who remarries, and she is brought up on charges and admits to murdering her husband. It started out okay, but it just went left. And I just want to tell you that this story is not, they asked him, I think, on CBS how he gets where he gets his idea from, but he plucked this right out of the national headlines. A story very similar to this was actually in Pennsylvania, where this black woman was finally arrested after it was found out that she was keeping either medically challenged or mentally challenged people hostage in her basement. And she was getting their Social Security and disability checks. Well, he took this on a Hollywood slant tangent and expanded it to multiple women. But at the same time, I didn't understand. The storyline itself could have been sussed out. For example, that the opening scene where the lady jumps off the roof, that was at Sarah's house. I didn't understand why that storyline wasn't more developed. I was waiting for the cop husband of the lawyer that represented Grace to come up and say, it wasn't too long ago that somebody actually died here, and she died under suspicious circs. They never really addressed the abandoned location of the notary public and the mail piling up. They never addressed the missing artist who is a female, what was her backstory and what actually happened to her. I would like to get a hold of the script or the director's notes, because I'm wondering how much direction they actually had and how many liberties that they were allowed to take in the making of this movie, because it just was missing so many parts. The pace of the story kind of got bogged down towards the middle once they went to trial, and then it slowed down again when the public defender got brought up on charges of being in contempt of court. There was just so much. It just kind of made my head hurt. And the climax, which could have brought in multiple streams, and the warning. Why wasn't she able to warn her lawyer in the courtroom about the duplicitousness of her so-called best friend? And no one was aware that all of these missing women, these women were going missing. why didn't one of their family members come forward in their suspicions? Um, why couldn't he have played up more on how all of these women, these marginalized people of society, there were at least 20, 30 women down there, and how they all went missing, but nobody said anything? Why wasn't that a theme that could have been sussed out? This movie had so much potential. It's just that a lot of the storylines hit a dead end. And if it had been done by a combination of very talented writers, I think all of those strings could have come together, have been developed, and then brought all together by the end in a more sane way. It just kind of fell short. And in that fact, it was actually very disappointing. Or why did it have to end so stupidly? One of the characters went on the run, even though she was obviously guilty. But it would have been great to also see how women also get their lives back together. The main character was finally acquitted, but I wish they could have been a little bit of denouement where she builds a relationship with her son and somehow is able to then help all of those women re-enter society, like she was going to need to re-enter society because they had been held captive for so long. That would have been a great ending and a formula for success. I think if he truly did have a writer's room, they probably, the writers may have suggested something similar to that. And also talking about the pace, character development, and storyline development, making it a little bit more cohesive to make that movie so much better than it actually was. Because what I saw yesterday definitely fell short. Or I can truly say it held up to my low expectations of a good Tyler Perry movie. I don't think that I'm going to have to remove that from my vocabulary because I don't think it exists anymore. Because that's a contradiction in terms. There really is no such thing as a good Tyler Perry movie any longer, period. And it's so wild because I want to like and support this brown brother making his way in Hollywood. But he's going to have to hire some people to fill up his writer's room. He really is. So, what of the Tyler Perry conundrum? Does he really think because of our loyalty and as the representative of the race, he has built his own table, he can throw anything our way and we're just going to accept it and we're going to continue to come back and pay good money to watch his films or stream those services? Nah, boy, I don't think so. I think he really does think, and he does have amazingly good ideas, because as I said, that storyline was taken right out of the press, and the lady actually got arrested up in Philadelphia. But he can't continue to give us these stories that are without fully developed storylines, that are not appropriately paced, and that there are no attentions to details. Because will we continue to accept mediocrity in the name that it's just a Tyler Perry joint that we're going to accept it. No, he can do better, and we know he can afford to do better. He just needs to develop these great ideas and turn it over into a writer's room. He has that capability to do that. And is he such a control freak that he doesn't trust himself to allow and give that much of his power away when it can only improve his product? I think he needs to really reconsider and find out, is his work ethic just a testament to his obsession and his control freak ways? I really should entitle this part of the episode TNFro by the River, because I wrote most of this while hanging out on the Tennessee River today. You know, I've actually enjoyed one of my most happiest pastimes, which is very simple. I love getting up in the morning, making coffee, taking my meds, securing a New York Sunday Times, which now you can actually get and listen to daily on Audible, along with the Wall Street Journal and the Washington Post. But this part of the segment of am I reading, I've read a whole bunch. And one of the things that I read today was and I took from the New York Times, was an opinion piece by Caitlin Greenidge. She was basically the bearable whiteness of Little Women. And I said in a previous episode that I always look to having and going to the movies, but I had no wish or necessity to go and watch another iteration of Louisa May Alcott's world famous book, Little Women. I get it, white girls, turn of the century. Some of the characteristics and themes cross over, like morality in an immoral time, strength, family are forever, but I had no wish to basically see that movie. But in her writing and how it was bearable for the writer of the opinion piece was she did have parallels to her own life. And I'm assuming that the writer or the author was African American. But she actually led me to someone I had never known, Ellen Garrison Jackson. She was an African American girl that was basically born at the same time as that book was read and was a contemporary of Louisa May Alcott. And it was wild because she was born in 1823, but she was actually born free. And in fact, she was the second generation of African Americans born on her family's homestead that had never seen slavery. Her grandfather was actually a Revolutionary War veteran, and that could actually have secured her a place if she had stayed in Concord for the Daughters of the Revolution, because he was one of the veterans of that war. He also saved up his money, that and another family member, to buy the homestead on which Miss Clark, that was her last husband's name, Miss Clark's family owned. So in one of the opinion pieces, and why a lot of African American all through the Twitterverse, they were saying, where are we in that particular story or in that narrative? We were there, always behind the scenes. Miss Garrison Jackson, her mother was actually working with the abolitionists of the time, as well as part of men's suffrage, getting the vote for the marginalized people of the society, right along with her own father not initially probably not being able to read or write because he himself was born a slave. And then educating her, Miss Ellen, as well as she had two brothers, John and William, and her other sister, Susan. But we were doing the thing during that period of time. It's just that, that wasn't in their sphere, or that's what Louisa May Alcott was trying to portray. She was only representing who she knew at the time and of her race and what she could relate to. But the themes that she actually portrayed in her book crossed over. It didn't matter. It doesn't matter what color you are. But getting back to Miss Clark, she actually gets married pretty young. She moves initially to Rhode Island. She gets widowed within the first couple of years of her marriage. Then she actually goes south and she marries again, but she wants to uplift her race and teach free men of color to educate themselves. This was 1865 to 1870. Probably during that period of time, she was probably mortally harassed because anytime you try to uplift a race, it just seems to bring out the violence in people. And in 1877, probably running in fear of her life, she actually settles in Kansas City. That was towards the end, when the disastrous results of Reconstruction were finally repealed and Jim Crow was enacted. There was no way she was going to Liberia, but she did, and several thousands African Americans during that time bounced, and they all went west. And that's where her story would have ended if it had not been for the internet, because I found her story on the Robbins House, which is the name of her family's homestead in Concord, Massachusetts. And one of the things that they remarked on in one of the pamphlets was, even though she was lost to history, after 1880, they still had the most records of her existence at that museum in a new, very thought-provoking exhibit at the Robbins House. But I took it upon myself. I looked her up by her last name, her multiple last names, because she was actually married to a man in Kansas City by the last name of Clark. And her death certificate is actually posted online. It has her passing away on December 21st, 1892, at the age of 62. The cause of death was consumption, or she actually died of TB. And she is buried, it looks like, at the Mountain View Cemetery in Los Angeles. She was only there for a couple of years, and probably because of her TB, that's why she and her family relocated from Kansas City to the warmer, drier climates of LA County. It does make sense. As I also said that I have been in contact, what I did was very simple. I wrote to, there was like a information email at the Robbins House. And this is basically what I wrote. This morning or this afternoon, I said, "Good morning. My name is Felicia Baxter and I'm an amateur podcaster. I was reading Caitlin Greenidge's opinion piece on the bearable whiteness of Little Women, and I read about Mrs. Ellison Garrison Jackson and her contribution to civil rights, and that of her family's influence. But I noticed in the pamphlet from Robin's House of her life, it states that it is unknown when and where she died because she disappeared from history after the 1880s when she went to Kansas. And then I told them I found her death certificate from 1892 where she died in Pasadena, California. And then I said I attached it to this email, and hopefully the history can be updated. One of the curators from that exhibit wrote me back, and she says, "Dear Felicia, thank you so much. You are wonderful. Have you included Ellen in your podcast? How can we access it? As well, we've continued to research Ellen's life and document much of it in our series of 6 brochures. We can send these to you if helpful. We have 2 brochures now that provide extensive details of Ellen's journey across the country. We will be sure to make sure these are accessible as well on our wonderful website. Let me know if you'd like snail mail copies of the brochures. Best New Year wishes, Maria, on behalf of the Robin's House Board." I thought that was actually so cool. And then I wrote her back and I said, "Oh, how are you? I plan to publish my podcast this evening, but the general feed is," and I gave them the FeliciaBaxter.podbean.com/feed.xml. And I said it's on Podbean, iTunes, Spotify, and Stitcher. I plan on responding to her and also donating to Robin's House because I know it takes money to produce great content. And I also plan on not only publishing a part of her story during this podcast, but as I receive that information from the Robin's House Board, I plan on including those details in subsequent shows. So that's probably one of the best things I actually did even today, because why is this woman that has done so much for me almost 200 years ago, why isn't she known to us? And this is just going to be part of my story, or what I'm planning on how to educate myself in the near future. I'm reading about Ida B. Wells. I find out about Miss Ellen. And it's interesting to me that there are just so many other African American women that have done so much to uplift the race that they have been lost to obscurity. But now is the time to give them, to shine the light on them, because nobody else seems to be. And I'm sure there are other compilations out there that will do an even better job of speaking about these women in the next that have been written about previously. I'm just doing my own compilation, one African American woman at a time. And I'm just so amazed and wonder about all of these women like Miss Ellen Clark and Ida B. Wells. And I wonder, did they ever cross paths? Ida was younger and definitely more brash than Miss Ellen seems to be. They were 2 unlikely leaders in a movement that if you professed that you were a part of, or you identified with the movement, or you spoke out, you automatically had a price on your head. I plan on continuing to educate myself not only about Miss Clark and her place in the abolishment of slavery and the civil rights movement, that the first act was passed back in 1864, and then we had another one that was exactly 100 years later, that Martin Luther King, he got a pin for it, but he also lost his life for it. But I also plan on highlighting other great African American women like Ida who were daring and brave, and there's just so much has been lost to history. And they didn't, and it was just so obvious at that period of time, especially in Ida, the Sword Among Lions, because she actually had to suffer not only from other white women and white men. She actually was thrown shade and had to contend with the judgment and persecuted by other women, black and white, as well as being thrown shade by the likes of Frederick Douglass and lack of support in general by black men. As much as slavery and Jim Crow tried to strip us of our identity and culture and self-respect, we had warriors that fought for us from the beginning, and 100 years even before Rosa Parks and MLK. And it's not lost on me that my attention to Ida and the early civil rights movement is just right up against Martin Luther King's birthday is tomorrow. And all of the talk about civil rights and how it's like education, it's an ongoing process, because we're in that time, that Renaissance time of 2008 until 2016 is definitely gone, and we've entered into a multitude of setbacks by someone that doesn't understand the magnanimity of what he's actually doing. And I also, it's not lost on me that Virginia and Richmond in general and specifically is shaking in their boots, because Richmond, the once capital of the Confederacy, they're supposed to be having a gun rights rally tomorrow of all days, and the gun right activists and white supremacists are planning to converge on the city for a rally that could turn into another bloodbath paralleling the Charlottesville massacre of a couple of years ago. But just like in Ida's times and MLK, I'm hopeful now when you call a bully's bluff and you point out and shame them on intolerance and racism and how it has no place in modern world and the brutality that they're trying to affect by bullying people to coming to their side and scaring people to become inactive, they usually will back down. I'm hopeful cooler heads will prevail, but I also realize that people are kind of stupid. Furthermore, I'm not going to let these fools stop me from reflecting on MLK's contributions and all the civil rights activists and how great it is, and how I feel honored that I even have a platform to be able to express my pride and respect for these great Americans. And this comes to the part of the show where I always try and want to encourage people, because I see this podcast as my own therapy and as my way of entertainment in a positive way. And I'm hopeful that most people that listen will also be just as encouraged as I have been. And getting back to the therapy component of it, this is my outlet of creativity. All the energy that I actually have stored up, I can actually put it into my podcast by researching music, researching the critical figures like Miss Ellen Clark, and reading that 700-page tome about Ida B. Wells, specifically for my podcast. But this brings me calm. But if you don't have this as this type of information or this type of platform as far as your outlet, you don't have to suffer in silence. Don't let anxiety steal your joy. There are phone numbers, TalkSpace and Doctor On Demand that can actually help you. And never contemplate suicide. Life is just so much better, and it will get better. but you can call 1-800-273-8255 and also contact them online at suicidepreventionlifeline.org/chat/. And there's also TalkSpace and Doctor On Demand that is actually cheaper and more accessible than conventional therapy. This journey is hard, and it's okay to ask for help. And this is where I'm going to end my show. Thank you guys for listening. Navigate to www.DalesAngels Inc. for all the special offers and updates on nerd news. Drop me a line at TNFroIsReading@gmail.com or even leave a 2-minute voicemail at 423-463-0658. If it's non-trolly, I may actually read it online. If you're tired of being a freeloader and you want to become a patron, navigate to patreon.podbean.com/thetalkingfro or put 5 on it and leave a tip at paypal.me/FeliciaDAI. And as always, thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this episode again just as much as I have enjoyed producing it. Until next time.